everyone. Thank you on behalf of the International Society for Quality of Life Studies for joining this webinar titled Who has autonomy and does it make us happy? Exploring the social distribution and impact of autonomy. Our speaker today, we're very honored to have you, is Dr. Leonie Steckermeier. The monitors for this webinar, well, Roger Fernandez-Urbano and myself, we are the ISQOLS Vice President of Online Events, and we will be facilitating the Q&A and serving as discussants for this session today. Now, our presenter, Leonie Steckermeier, is a junior professor of applied sociology at the University of Kaiserslautern Landau, Germany, and I haven't practiced, I speak fluently German, of course. She earned her PhD in sociology from the Otto von Guericke University Magdeburg, and her research focuses on social stratification and social indicators, employing theory-driven, quantitative, and cross-national comparative approaches to analyze social inequality and its consequences. Currently, her work focuses on gender paths to subjective well-being, as well as the role of status anxiety and status seeking in people's well-being and quality of life. Without further ado, Leonie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you for having me. And thank you all for being here. I'm surprised and delighted by how many people showed up and are interested in the relationship between autonomy and well-being. Before we actually start talking about autonomy and its relationship to well-being, we first need to talk a little bit about agency. Because for us sitting here in this meeting, wherever you are around the globe, it feels very natural to assume that people have agency, that they are active agents in their own lives. But this way of thinking, this belief in individual agency was not always a given. In the earliest human societies, as we narrate history nowadays, as we narrate it in idealized terms, people had no agency. Their lives were rather seen as predetermined by fate, by divine will, or by cosmic forces. The gods, the stars, other supernatural powers, the universe dictated the course of people's lives and also the course of events that happened. Over time, then agency became something that could be attributed to certain individuals, to important people, to prophets, rulers, explorers. And these people were seen as having the power, the agency to change the course of society and thus to actively make history, to change how things were going and where they were going. The regular people like you and me, of course, still had no agency in that sense that we believe that they had no belief about their own agency in their lives. Moving forward, then, we take an interesting turn where we start attributing agency to society as a whole, while still downplaying the agency of the individual. Agency now takes the form of representation, which is maybe like an aggregated version of the individual will. And only in modernity, we start then to attribute agency to the individual. Adam Smith, Invisible Hand of the Market, as well as some linguistic observations on how individuals actually changed the use of everyday language, contributed to this rather new understanding of individuals as active agents, as people who intentionally or unintentionally were involved in societal change. And only then, when we have this active agents, we can think about an autonomous individual, because autonomous individuals, as I understand them and will present them to you today in this talk, are active agents first and foremost. They recognize themselves as a source of their actions. as having power and control over their choices. They are able to rationally reflect on their goals and values, and they will translate their goals and values into appropriate action. This also means that they have or need to have real and substantially different opportunities. You need different opportunities to choose from. If you only have one thing, there's no choice. And you need to be actively engaged in the process of choosing. If you're not the one doing the choosing, if someone else does the choosing for you, even if you come out of this process with what you wanted, you are not a fully autonomous individual. And of course, being an autonomous individual then also means to assume responsibility for the actions which you have chosen. But this also means that you are not responsible for opportunities that you did not have, so you could not choose from them, and choices that you did not make but were made by someone else, or you simply couldn't make. So this is just my general understanding of the autonomous individual. How do we measure this now in empirical terms? The most prominent instrument, I think, to capture autonomy was provided by the fathers of the self-determination theory, Deci and Ryan. They developed a 21-item basic psychological need satisfaction scale, which captures people's basic needs for competency, autonomy, and relatedness. And the subscale for autonomy is captured by these 7 items, which you can see here on this slide. And one of these items, namely the first one, was then later adapted into large-scale cross-national population representative social surveys, on which I will base the research I will be presenting you today. This item was adapted into the European Social Survey in 2 waves, and into the European Quality of Life Survey also in 2 of the waves. And they have a slight difference, where the European Social Survey is closer to the original scale, with the focus on for myself. I feel I'm free to decide for myself how to live my life, whereas in the European Quality of Life Survey, they drop this additional emphasis on the self. Another item that is very commonly used to capture autonomy stems from the World and European Value Surveys. It asks, some people feel they have completely free choice and control over their lives, while other people feel that what they do has no real effect on what happens to them. Please use the scale where 1 means none at all and 10 means a great deal to indicate how much freedom of choice and control you feel you have over the way your life turns out. And the difference, I think, between the 2 items is immediately obvious. First of all, the ESS and EQLS items is much easier, it's much shorter. It's something that you don't really need to think about that much, whereas the World Value and European Value Survey item is more complex. There's more going on in there. And the second big difference between these 2 items is that the value survey item includes an aspect of locus of control, that is whether you believe that you are in control of what you're doing, of your actions completely, or whether the locus of control is something outside of yourself. So the source of your actions is not yourself, but something outside. This could be, again, for example, God or divine fate, but it could also be real people, like your parents pressuring you into becoming a medical doctor, just to give you an idea. The value survey item thus touches upon the question of agency, which we talked about in the beginning, whether people believe they can actually influence the way their life turns out. So while the first item, which was adapted from the VPNS, considers sort of the active agent as a given, the value survey item puts the active agent into questions, or at least puts it on a scale. Unfortunately for us, we do not have these items in the same questionnaire or in the same survey. So we cannot check whether on individual level they actually capture a similar notion of autonomy. On country level, we can see that the value survey item correlates occasionally, I would say, with the European Social Survey item, and quite well, actually, with the EQLS item, especially considering that the inter-item correlation within one item across different survey waves is not that strong either. So it's probable to say that they capture something similar. Again, we can only say that on country level, not on an individual level. So for the research I'm going to present to you today, I am going to draw on a review I did for my PhD thesis, which was not so much a literature review in the classical sense, but more of an item review. So I focused my review on research articles that included either of the items I just presented to you, and which were based on representative samples of the population or on representative sample of larger subpopulations, like, for example, the working age population. And this review yielded 116 papers in total. You see the little +1 on the bottom. That is one paper that I wrote, which was excluded from the original review in my PhD, but I included in this presentation today. So from this 116 papers, most used the value survey item, which is not that surprising considering it has been around much longer. The value survey item was introduced in 1981 and has been in every wave since. The European Social Survey item and the European Quality of Life Survey item, which stem from the BPNS, is mostly used to capture autonomy. Here I simply coded the wording the authors used in their paper. And to a lesser extent, it is used to capture perceptions of choice and control. In contrast, you can see the value survey item is used mostly to capture control or control perceptions, followed by freedom and choice perceptions, fatalism, autonomy, and agency. As you can also see, it's overall used more diversely. And this diverse use of the two items actually reflects the interdisciplinary overlap of the concept of autonomy, which can take various forms in the literature, from autonomy and agency, which we tap today, to self-directedness, to self-efficacy, competence, and also negative forms like fatalism or powerlessness. And for everyone or anyone who's interested in autonomy or any of these related concepts, I highly recommend the two papers I put on this slide. So Let's now move on finally to see some results, and we will start with the question of who has autonomy, and we will start on the individual level. With regard to ascriptive characteristics, we have some info on gender, age, and to a lesser extent ethnicity and immigration. However, the picture is quite mixed. You can see what I did here is I posed only for this presentation a sort of statement, and then simply counted how many articles were in line with this statement here in green on the first line, how many found a non-significant relationship in gray on the second line, and how many found a contradicting effect in red on the third line. Overall, most research points toward an autonomy bonus for men or non-significant differences between men and women. And one study found that this gap between men and women in autonomy is more pronounced in less developed countries and closes with increasing human development, which could explain some of the non-significant findings. With regards to age, at least when we look at age in a linear way, the picture is rather mixed, which could also point to there being a U-shaped relationship. There are some papers that they test and find this U-shaped relationship, wherein younger and older people experience more autonomy in their lives, which kind of makes sense considering that people in midlife have a lot on their slate, a lot of responsibilities, which then could take a toll on their autonomy. With regards to ethnicity and migration, the research is very scarce, as you can see. There are only 2 papers, or back then there were only 2 papers that looked at this, and they found that there's an autonomy bonus for being white, at least in Mexico and the US, and an autonomy penalty for being an immigrant, especially for people who did not speak English at home, or the country of the language of the country, in this case English in the US. When we now move on to achieved characteristics, you can see that the picture is much clearer. Education, financial security, doesn't matter if you measure it objectively or subjectively, and employment are all positively related to people's autonomy. So the higher educated you are, the more financially secure you are, and when you're employed, then you're on the good side of autonomy. You have a lot of freedom of choice. In contrast to people in gainful employment, the unemployed especially, but also the otherwise not employed, such as house spouses or student or retirees, report lower levels of autonomy. 2 further themes popped up a little bit more often in the literature. These are relationships and religion. The final 2 we are going to look at on individual level. Overall, I would say that the relationship between relationships and individual autonomy is understudied. Most of the research looks at marital status, which does not tell us too much. And also the research on marital status produces very mixed results. We could maybe tentatively deduce that singles and married people do better autonomy-wise than the divorced, separated, and widowed people, but the picture overall is not that clear. And in general, I would say that marital status is not what you want to know about when you're looking at autonomy. You would want to know the actual relationship, the actual household composition, the partnership situation, the care work situation, in order to find out something meaningful about autonomy. Another point that is under research, and I think there should be more research on, is the question whether children actually draw on your autonomy. Because the picture right now, as you can see, is mixed. There's some evidence for a positive effect, there's some evidence for a negative effect, but it's rather unclear. And we can say from the two papers that social connections outside of the family, so good connections to your friends and family, have a positive effect on autonomy, and that people who trust others also perceive higher autonomy over their lives. But overall, there could be more research here. The second theme that was also popping up a little bit more in the literature review with regards to antecedents of autonomy was the question of religion, which I think is quite interesting, especially regarding the question of agency in autonomy. Also here, the comparability of the findings is complicated by the different operationalizations of the denominations and the differences in the reference categories. A tentative ranking across the denominations would see Hindus at the top of the autonomy ranking, followed by atheists, Protestants and Buddhists, and concluding with then the Catholics, the Jews, the Muslims, and Orthodox. More interesting, however, than the denominations is actual religiosity and behavior, because here overall, I would say, contrary to what we might expect, both religiosity and church attendance appear to be rather positively related to autonomy, which kind of questions this idea of religion drawing on people's own agency perception. From the individual level, we now stay with the conditions, but we move up to macro level and start with the economic conditions of autonomy. And here we can find again, a quite equivocal picture, as we also saw from the achieved characteristics on the individual level. Research on economic conditions suggests that at country level, autonomy rather flourishes in wealthier and growing economies, but also in more competitive economies with few constraints and limited welfare. With regards to institutional conditions, research shows that countries that guarantee human freedoms, such as freedom of speech and movement, freedom from violence and threats, promote autonomy. Human development and its subdomains were also positively related to autonomy on country level. Gender equality was found unrelated, which is maybe not that surprising considering that there are no real gender differences in autonomy on individual level. And finally, there's a bunch of research on political systems and governance, and they repeatedly find no relationship between any measure of political system or type or size of governments to the overall level of autonomy. So there's apparently nothing in there. With regard to cultural conditions, overall there could be more research here, and the few papers that looked at this found that societies that embrace post-materialistic and individualistic values promote autonomy on macro level. but there might also be a U-shaped relationships where societies that transition from collectivistic to individualistic societies have lower levels of autonomy levels, which would suggest that in collectivist and individualist societies, we have higher levels of autonomy. And there are also two isolated findings that point toward an autonomy advantage for Protestant countries and for countries characterized by smaller families, but that might just capture a proxy or be a proxy for modernization. Let's now finally have a look at how autonomy relates to well-being, because this is why you are actually here, probably. And the good message here is that autonomy very, very probably relates positively to people's well-being. Autonomy is positively related to life satisfaction, to happiness, and other measures of well-being, like flourishing, for example, both on the individual and on country level. This link between autonomy and subjective well-being is further found in all societies, irrespective of their level of affluence. However, it is stronger in more affluent societies, and within the less affluent societies, the link between autonomy and well-being is stronger in more unequal countries. The link between autonomy and well-being is further stronger in more individualistic societies and in more modern, higher developed societies. But again, we need more research on this to be sure. With regards to health, there is overall less research, and it is not as clear as the link between autonomy perceptions and subjective well-being. Overall, autonomy is positively associated with self-rated health, both on individual and on country level. Two articles further find a link between country level autonomy and higher levels of certain diseases, such as coronary heart disease and unintentional injury in the elderly, or lung cancer in women. However, this might also point more to a common cause for both, where in more modern, more higher developed societies with a higher life expectancy, you have more autonomy, but you also have more coronary heart disease, you have more unintentional injury in the elderly because you have more elderly people. In contrast to physical health, the picture for mental health is more mixed and warrants further exploration. Only two studies look at this link on country level. Both look at suicide rates, and one of them finds that higher levels of autonomy are linked to higher suicide rates in male youth. But again, we don't have much research on that. Similar to subjective well-being, there's also some indication that the link between autonomy and health grows stronger in more affluent societies, and within the group of the less affluent societies, it is stronger in the more unequal ones. Final piece of information on autonomy and how it relates to well-being stems from one of my own papers, the +1 paper, actually. And here I pointed out that autonomy does not only contribute directly to well-being, but also that it influences how certain basic goods, such as financial security, respect, friendship, and health, relate to people's life satisfaction. Looking at the example of health, we can see that, of course, as we all know, health is positively related to people's life satisfaction. The better your health is, the more satisfied you are with your life. However, this link becomes weaker for people who perceive more autonomy over their lives. This means, if you turn it around, that people who experience lower autonomy in their lives are more dependent on having good health. A bad state of health is more detrimental if you have low autonomy or perceive to have low autonomy in your lives. Based on these results that I have presented, we can say that more autonomy, that means more opportunities in your life to choose from and more freedom of choice, are overall conducive to well-being. However, there are also voices that would disagree with this. The longest standing debate is probably the question on whether rising individualization and rising levels of autonomy that come with it are a good thing, where people are liberated and enjoy greater freedom and better quality of life, or whether it is rather a bad thing because community is lost and all of its positive qualities that are actually conducive to people's well-being are lost, and people become increasingly self-centered and isolated also. And the second debate relates to rather the overburdening of the individual, who's not only free to choose between different options, but is constantly forced to choose between options, from everyday decisions on how to dress or what to eat, to life decisions, where and what to study, when and whether to become a parent, whether or not to change jobs, and so on. And this idea is largely based on the observation that there was an erosion throughout modernization of the structured, very predictable life course that people had, with stable careers, lifelong marriages, and clear social expectations. And this erosion now forces people increasingly to construct their own biographies and to become entrepreneurs of themselves. And people nowadays have to bear more and more responsibility for this construction of their lives, and also for the success and failure that comes with that. And this, the argument goes, then leads to stress and anxiety. And of course, stress and anxiety are not good for our well-being. And this is something that is not that well researched yet, and could be an interesting avenue to go down. The empirical evidence on negative consequences of autonomy is still scarce, and rather focuses on aspects, I would say, that linked to a worse society, not so much to the individual consequences. It has the few papers that we have here that look at these issues point towards a more pronounced meritocratic worldview in people who perceive greater autonomy in their lives, and maybe every man to himself kind of attitude, and a blindness to inequality in society, whether it relates to income or education or health. To sum up, we already know quite a bit about how autonomy contributes to subjective well-being. However, there are also gaps that warrant further investigation. First of all, I think it would be important to explore the country differences in the link between autonomy and well-being further, because mainly the focus here is on national wealth and the collectivist, individualist value climate change. So there might be other contextual factors that influence this link between autonomy and well-being. A second aspect that should be explored further is the connection between autonomy and mental health, especially in view of these rising autonomy demands that especially the critics point out, which have the potential to harm people's well-being. And I think we should find out how that happens, how rising demands for autonomy harm people, and who is most affected by this. And with this, I thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Leonie, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. It was very interesting. I particularly like the part of the dark side of autonomy, which at the end is also one of the critiques that has been made to the neoliberal rationale. And I have a question about that. But before that, we are now going to open the Q&A sessions. So please, I encourage everyone to open your cameras so we can have or try to have a more natural interaction. And before that, we will start with some questions that has been made in the chat. For instance, one of the first ones has been made by David Bartram, by Professor David Bartram, that asks, I wonder if there is a possibility of too much autonomy for subjective well-being. I am thinking of Schwartz's book, The Paradox of Choice, perhaps explored the logged independent variable, and there is the Schwartz book. Maybe you have something to say about that, Leonie?
Well, yes. I mean, this is partly, I think, I touched this with the negative side of autonomy. I actually very much enjoyed the paradox of choice, though there is not too much research on that beyond consumption choices. And I think we need more. We need more research on that. I think there is a too much autonomy with regard to these societal consequences, where people who have too much autonomy have these meritocratic worldviews and ignore inequality and are opposed to government helping people and things like that. But also, I think that people are overburdened, and we should capture this. I did some digging into this way back, where I actually wanted to look at the interaction between autonomy and anomy, so this loss of general norms. Unfortunately, there's not really good items in the large-scale representative surveys, but I looked at the interaction between people feeling overwhelmed and autonomy, and there is something in there. So people who feel they have, it doesn't even really matter whether they feel they have autonomy or not. But if this combines with this feeling of being overwhelmed, it is harmful to well-being. So yes, I think definitely there is a point to make for too much autonomy being harmful both to individuals and to society.
Fantastic, Leonie, for your answer. Before coming back to the chat, that we also have some questions. There was a question. Please raise your hands if you want to directly ask a question. Lucas Spatz has a question. Maybe Lucas, if you can unmute yourself and put on the camera, and if you can be short.
Yes, hi. Yeah, I very much enjoy this interdisciplinary perspectives. This is the first presentation, I think, in the ISQL from sociology. And yeah, so what I wanted to ask basically is, I dig a bit, I'm working also with the variable external locus of control, and I think it's very important variable also to explain life satisfaction. And I was wondering, because you also mentioned it, for example, and do you have an idea of how much actually the correlation is between the two? Because I think the concepts are very much related to each other. So I was wondering a bit about the differences and the comparison. And well, I have two other questions, but I don't know if maybe I just asked them. So yeah, I was also wondering if you mentioned a few surveys, and I'm working with the ZERP, the German socioeconomic panel. Maybe you know if this variable is also captured in the ZERP, because I am not aware of it. And then the other question was about the third, that is, you've mentioned a lot of correlations or a lot of relationship within how much these in different countries are these things, autonomy differs. But I was also wondering, is there any do you dig into the matter of causation, or did you have just correlations? And I think it's very important to think about what actually is how actually to get maybe to think of causality. And thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think I can really quickly go through this. I actually don't know about the relationship between autonomy and locus of control, but the psychologists have a load of literature on that, based on, of course, not representative samples, but the typical convenience samples. So I think you could take a look on that. I do not believe that you have an autonomy item in the SUB, but I wouldn't know. But I think it would have. I would, if someone would have published something in English and it had the phrase, the item in it, then I would have picked it up in the literature review, because as we saw before, I looked at 900 papers and dissertations and other publications, and never did the sub come up. So I think probably no. And of course, everything I presented today, or probably 98% of what I presented today, is all correlational, because these are cross-national, cross-sectional data, and especially on country level, we will probably never really figure out what is hen and what is egg. A lot of things come together, a lot of things maybe push each other up, maybe they are spiraling together with interdependencies. But yes, this is all correlational. Again, there is, on the question of causation, you would have to look more into the psychological research, but I did not go into this, because all of this, what I've presented to you today and what I used in my PhD thesis, was based only on representative population samples.
Thank you, Leonie, for your question, and for your answer, and Lucas for your question. The next one is Heila. Please, if you can unmute yourself and open your camera.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes, I'm not sure if I can open the camera because I'm not ready. I'm at home now. So if you don't mind, I just share my voice. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. I really enjoyed it so much, and it raised up lots of questions in my mind, being a Saudi woman. And I didn't, I don't know if I missed that, but I didn't see anything related to gender, like men, male and female variables, just to see how it's different between both gender. And also coming from Saudi background, in this special stage in Saudi Arabia, where the government pushing a lot of efforts to empower women. So women empowerment, it's in kind of a bit young compared with the back history of Saudi women and back eras. And I appreciate that you distinguish between the conceptual meaning of autonomy, but I still doubt it when it comes to Arabic meaning, because you know there is implicit meanings of any different variables, especially we are using, including myself with my students, usually we use Western skills. Sometimes I do lots of effort to make it more adaptable with the society, but there is, I think, mixed up between autonomy and freedom. And as you know, freedom is very related, and in some, especially women and men and women in Saudi Arabia, they mix up the meaning between the two, because freedom gives kind of negative meaning, whereas autonomy gives positive meaning. Also, for women, being more empowered by the government, I heard from like a discourse between my students, female students, there is kind of a rejection of autonomy, because they think autonomy, they will make them more like, sorry, but to be like very direct, like some Western women, that they work all the time, they are into this economical circle, trying to push much to be independent and to share men equally. Some of which is interesting to me as a mature Saudi woman, that why they think this way. They are the goal of autonomy is can be a variable that we can measure, if the goal is to get rested and to be more feminine, and they enjoy being women more than being getting out of the to the society, pushing for their place, finding their successful spot, rather than just being relaxed and being pampered a bit, especially taking the account of the history of Arabic women, maybe in general, and Saudi women in particular. Lots of other questions came across my mind during your interesting topic, including even religiosity, because religiosity, as you mentioned, increase the feeling of autonomy. So this makes me think about also the purpose behind going to church or to the mosque. If it's just for their own beliefs, just to feel secured, or just to be to satisfy the, you know, the macro level and the authority of, you know, of society. Also, this something changed lately in Saudi Arabia. So all of what you mentioned is very interesting, and I would love to measure it here in Saudi Arabia, and these variables you did, and more other psychological also effects. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. That were very, very many questions. I would choose a few that I can quickly answer. With regards to the male-female difference, there is an indication that there is a male-female difference, where men have more autonomy in less developed countries, and this gap closes with human development and higher national affluence. So that in higher developed, Western, industrialized, rich, democratic, educated countries, we don't have much of a gender gap anymore. I want to point out that most of the research that I presented is based on Western country samples, and this is probably also due to a choice of mine, because all of the literature that I reviewed was written in English, because I'm not able to read any other languages than English and German, and the whole measurement and concept is probably very Western. So there's probably a need to have maybe a different conceptualization and a different measurement also in other cultural regions of the world that incorporate a lot of things that you just said. I think one of the best examples for this is that I was really surprised when I saw that religion is positively associated with autonomy. And of course, it totally makes sense. We know that religious people are happier, are healthier. They get community sense from going to church. You have social capital there. This is all good to your well-being, and it's also, of course, then good for your autonomy. And this is one final point I want to make to your questions, is that autonomy does not mean to be independent. There's a whole strain of theoretical research, especially in philosophy, that discusses how being autonomous does not mean being independent from others, but that social interconnectedness actually improves and strengthens your own autonomy. Being isolated is not good for your autonomy. So it's actually interesting that your students, your female students, seem to put this equal. To be autonomous means to be to having to be independent. So this would also maybe be a very interesting cultural difference to look into more.
Thank you, Leonie, for your answer. I know that you had a lot of questions. We have time for maybe one or two more questions. The next one is that Dennis, please, if you can try to be short, and Leonie, if you can try to answer fast, maybe then Ether can ask his question.
Yeah, thank you so much for the Leonie, wonderful presentation. Denise Dussel, I'm a sociologist myself. I'm connecting here today from all the way from US. So I do have some follow-up questions, but as Roger said, we don't have time. So I will just send you an email if you don't mind. But I'm a huge fan of your work, and it's good to see you here. Talking back, just revisiting this literature, and I think your presentation did a really good job. As Roger, I also really enjoyed especially the slide that we're seeing right now on the screen, the dark side of autonomy, right? So I think that was very interesting. Just wanted to ask, and I wrote that in the chat too, but because the autonomy and what we understand from autonomy, as Hela mentioned a few minutes ago, varies from one person to another, even within the same region, right? So I think the definition or conceptualization of autonomy, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like we need much work on this, because as long as there is consensus in how we define autonomy, there cannot be consensus on how we measure autonomy. And one of my questions in the chat was, autonomy is a very broad concept, abstract concept, as I'm sure we all agree. And I was just wondering if during your review, if you focused on different aspects of autonomy. One particular one that I'm working on, that I have been working on for several years, is job autonomy, for example. And depending on whether individuals prefer job autonomy or not, right? So the consequences might be very different from people, because we all assume that people do want and appreciate job autonomy, but research shows otherwise. So not only autonomy, my question is, to make it short, but what types of autonomy we're talking about? And number two, do people actually prefer autonomy? So I know some surveys recently started including that item, where there's a question, Do you actually prefer this economy or no? Is it something that you desire? And I think that also shows this discrepancy in individuals' responses. So I just wanted to see your reaction to this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, very, very many questions. I think the one issue is the question of universality of measures that we always have, especially in the larger surveys. I presented in the beginning the full BPNS sub-scale for autonomy, which captures at least the 7 items. And this has shown good comparability in different contexts around the world. But of course, in a large scale survey, you cannot include these huge scales. You cannot measure everything with 21 items. So they had to just pick one. And we will always have this trade-off problem. I would have loved to have items that look at different life aspects, but I had to focus on this general life autonomy, where you never really know what people actually refer to. Do they refer to their everyday life with their family and their 3 children, or do they refer to work where everyone burdens them with stuff? We don't know. And I think this is an important thing to go deeper into. Unfortunately, we don't have these items in the larger scales. Yeah, sorry, I forgot the last point, but please include it in the email and we can talk about this.
I'll do that. Thank you so much.
We have now the last question by Christopher, please, and then we will do the closing. And Leonie, please also look at the chat that there are other questions for you. Thank you. Christopher?
We cannot hear you.
Yeah, we cannot hear you, Christopher.
I think now. Say something.
Say something, no, Christopher. Sorry. Okay. Well, maybe.
Write it.
Maybe Christopher, you can write to Leonie, and because it seems that now.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, first, thank you for your very interesting presentation. I have been following your work also for a while now. I come from the field of medical sociology. I'm dealing a lot with how social contexts influence mental health. And because it was very interesting, because you mentioned Perlin and the sense of mastery concept in one of your slides. And like, I was wondering, because you had addressed the relationship between autonomy and mental health and how it's like maybe a bit diffuse based on the previous research. Like I was really wondering if maybe because in my research I found I worked with share and I found like a positive association between at least measures of control and depressiveness, like the more you're feeling in control of your life, the less depressed you are. For all types of welfare states that I used, and I was wondering if maybe that's the key, like with Perlin's theory, or maybe with Antonovsky's theory, like the manageability in the sense of coherence. Maybe like that's the key link, the kind of problem-solving capability that's somewhere in these constructs. Maybe that's where there might be a link between autonomy, control, and mental health. And also, I remember like a few papers also from the whole stress process literature, where they found like a link between like mastery and these control variables and mental health, which was like mediated by coping style. Like the more you feel in control, the better your coping style is, and then the better your mental health. And maybe that's something to think about. yeah, that's just a comment, and thanks for this very interesting presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Just one quick comment to that. That is a really good point, because not just to look at the other psychological needs like mastery, competence, but also again, everything I presented today was based on a research review I did 3 years ago. So that there's much more newer literature out there, or not much more, but a little bit more. And everything I presented was based on representative data. So if you go into psychological literature, you will find results that show that autonomy has an impact on mental health. But then we don't really know how that is, for example, how prevalent this is in societies, because for that we would need the representative samples.
So, thank you very much, Leonie. Thank you everyone for participating in Leonie's webinar. And we are now finishing for today. So please be sure to participate in all of the other ISQOLS webinar sessions. We will be posting this recording and as well as the other ones in our ISQOLS platform in YouTube. And thank you, Leonie, again for this very interesting presentation, and for everyone that has attended today. So hopefully see you soon in the ISQOLS conference in Luxembourg. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a nice day.
Jill, do you want to add something, maybe?
Yeah, that's a great segue to remind everyone, excuse me, that we have our early bird registration deadline coming up April 15th. So please do register to take advantage of the discounts. We hope to see everyone in Luxembourg this July. Thank you, Leonie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.